90%. Remember that number. 90% of the kerosene flowing through American soil. 90% of the light in every living room, every factory. All of it held in the palm of this man's hand, John D. Rockefeller. In 1880, if you wanted to light a lamp, you paid a tax to John D. Rockefeller, not because his oil was the best, but because he had wiped out everyone in his path. He didn't compete, he eliminated. You own a refinery, he buys out the railroad leading to it. You cut prices to survive, he sells at a loss until you're penniless. You try to resist? One morning you wake up. Customers have vanished. Lawyers are silent. The courts look away. No warning. Just a letter on the desk. Sell to us or disappear. Because this isn't a story about a businessman. This is the script of a man who kidnapped an entire nation. He didn't sell oil. He sold submission. Because when Standard Oil took control, light was no longer a right. It was a privilege, and a privilege can always be revoked. Rockefeller once said, "Competition is a sin," and he lived it word for word. The most brutal empire in American history, not conquered with guns, but with logistics, with contracts signed in the shadows, with the terrifying silence of money. Standard Oil, the entity that turned out the lights on America. 1859, Pennsylvania. A man named Edwin Drake drills a 70-foot hole and strikes oil. All of America goes wild. Suddenly, everyone thinks they're a tycoon. Farmers abandon their fields. Blacksmiths drop their hammers. The entire town of Titusville transforms into a quagmire of greed, reeking of sulfur and the blind dreams of those desperate for a new life. Derricks and refineries sprout like mushrooms after a storm. Oil prices dance like a drunkard rich today, penniless tomorrow. No one knows what they're doing, and no one cares. It was chaos, pure and simple, but chaos cannot scale. And one man in Cleveland saw that clearer than anyone else, John D. Rockefeller, the son of a traveling medicine con man named William Devil Bill. His father taught him a single brutal lesson: appearance matters more than truth. Dress sharp, speak with confidence, and never, ever let anyone know what you're thinking. This lesson would later turn John into a master of image. At 16, John worked as an assistant bookkeeper for 50 cents a day, boring work, but he mastered a skill worth more than gold: reading the ledgers. He knew exactly where the money was flowing. He knew who was turning a profit and who was quietly bleeding to death. He saved every single penny. In 1859, with his savings and a loan from his own con man father, he opened his first brokerage. The timing was perfect. While the rest of the world rushed madly into the mines to drill, Rockefeller chose to refine. Because he understood a simple truth: oil in the ground is dirt. Oil in the lamp, that is power. In 1863, he opened his first refinery. 2 years later, he ousted his partner, Clark, in a high-stakes auction. Rockefeller took everything. Clark left with nothing. It wasn't betrayal, it was efficiency. In Rockefeller's eyes, a partner was nothing but a burden if they failed to create surplus value. When he needed capital, he turned to millionaire Stephen Harkness. Harkness invested $100,000 with one condition: take his relative, Henry Flagler, as a partner. It proved to be a stroke of genius. A diabolical alliance was formed. Rockefeller provided the strategy. Flagler provided the political firepower and the ruthless negotiation skills at the dinner table. In 1870, at the age of 31, Rockefeller founded Standard Oil. But make no mistake, this wasn't just a company, it was a machine designed for a single purpose: to swallow everything in its path. And it wouldn't do it through a better product. It would do it through something far more dangerous: the system. This is how the system operated. Oil has value only if you can move it. In the 1870s, the railroads were the only way. Rockefeller looked at them and saw the jugular of the entire industry. and he decided to squeeze. In 1872, he birthed a secret entity, the South Improvement Company, or SIC. It sounded innocuous, but it was a weapon of mass destruction in the world of business. Rockefeller met with the three biggest railroad tycoons. He made them an offer they couldn't refuse. All of Standard Oil's volume will travel on your rails, exclusively, massive quantities. But I need something in return. The railroads nodded. Volume discounts were standard, but Rockefeller didn't just want a discount. He wanted the blood of his rivals. The deal was signed. Standard Oil received a 50% rebate on shipping costs. Competitors paid full price. And here is the stroke of genius. Every time a competitor shipped a barrel of oil, the railroad charged them full price, then quietly funneled 50% of that money directly into Rockefeller's pocket. Read that again. Rockefeller didn't just get a discount for himself. He was getting paid from the very shipments of his enemies. The more they sold, the richer he became. This wasn't competition. This was systematic hemorrhaging. When the deal leaked, the oil men went livid. They burned his effigy in the streets, but it was already too late. Because in the first 3 months of 1872, Rockefeller executed what history calls the Cleveland Massacre. He met with every single refinery owner, 26 men, a quiet conversation, no threats, just the naked truth. Your shipping costs just doubled. Mine dropped by half. You can fight, but in 6 months, you will be bankrupt. Or you can sell to me now, a fair price, no pain. 22 refineries surrendered in 90 days. Those who refused, Rockefeller flooded the market with cheap kerosene. He sold below cost. Standard Oil could afford to bleed for a year, even 2. His rivals could not. And when they were reduced to rubble, Rockefeller returned to buy them at scrap value. But a price war was only one weapon in his arsenal. Rockefeller owned the infrastructure. He bought out the pipelines. By 1880, he controlled 90% of the industry's veins. If you didn't sell your oil to Standard Oil, you couldn't move it. Simple as that. He owned the barrel factories. Competitors had to buy barrels from him at triple the price. He owned the tankers, the storage, the retail outlets. They call it vertical integration. Rockefeller didn't invent it. He perfected it to a point of cruelty. And then there was the Espionage Network. He hired detectives to shadow his rivals. He bribed railroad clerks to intercept his enemies' contracts. When you're playing poker and the man across from you can see every card in your hand, you don't have a prayer. By 1880, Standard Oil controlled 90% of American oil refining. 90%. This wasn't just a company, it was a state within a state. But absolute power cannot hide in the shadows forever. And the light was about to hit Standard Oil not from the government, but from a woman with a personal reason to destroy Rockefeller. Ida Tarbell. Remember that name, for she was the only woman who brought down the most powerful empire in American history. In 1857, her father owned a small refinery in Pennsylvania, an honest businessman, a man who believed in fair competition. Then, Standard Oil arrived. Her father refused to sell out. 6 months later, he was bankrupt. Not because he was incompetent, but because shipping rates suddenly doubled, while Rockefeller drove market prices into the dirt. Ida Tarbell grew up watching her father be destroyed, not by alcohol or gambling, but by a system designed solely to crush men like him. And she did not forget. In 1902, she was the leading investigative journalist for McClure's magazine. She decided to do what no one else dared, to strip Standard Oil bare. She spent 5 years of her life digging through thousands of court documents, interviewing hundreds of victims, and exposing the secret deals made under the table. Between 1902 and 1904, 19 articles were published. Each was a lethal strike aimed directly at the heart of the giant. She didn't just report numbers, she told stories of broken families, of refinery owners who took their own lives after losing everything, and of towns withering away under Rockefeller's chokehold. For the first time, America saw the true face of John D. Rockefeller, not a business genius, but an economic dictator. Public pressure exploded like a powder keg. President Theodore Roosevelt, known as the Trust Buster, officially declared war. But remember, this was an empire. They didn't fear the law, they owned the law. Standard Oil hired a legion of lawyers, bribed officials, and manipulated the media to drag out the litigation. When testifying before Congress, Rockefeller answered every question with 4 simple words: "I don't remember." Hundreds of times, a defiant silence. "I don't remember." But in 1911, Judgment Day finally arrived. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled Standard Oil had violated the Antitrust Act. The empire was ordered to be carved into 34 independent companies. People celebrated. They thought they had won, but it was the most naive mistake in history. Here is the ultimate irony. Rockefeller owned shares in all 34 of those new companies. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Amoco, Marathon, all descendants of Standard Oil. Before the breakup, Rockefeller's net worth was $300 million. After, it rocketed to $900 million. Instead of one giant hated by the world, he now held 34 independent entities competing fairly on paper. The U.S. government thought they had brought him down. In reality, they had just made him 3 times richer. But power always comes with a price. The relentless pressure of legal warfare ravaged Rockefeller's body. He lost every strand of hair on his head. He suffered from chronic insomnia. His digestive system was so decimated that he was reduced to a diet of only milk and crackers. Ida Tarbell once described him as the most sorrowful man in the world, the richest man on the planet, yet he looked like nothing more than a walking corpse. When the empire was dismantled and the burden of command vanished, Rockefeller gained the one thing money couldn't buy: freedom. But he didn't use it to rest. He used it to buy back his soul, or at the very least, to buy back the appearance of one. He hired the world's first PR experts to whitewash his image. He began handing out dimes to children on the street. He established massive philanthropic foundations, pouring fortunes into medicine and education, saving millions of lives. And that is his legacy. Half the world remembers him as the demon who turned out the lights on America. The other half venerates him as a saint who redeemed humanity through charity. The name Standard Oil has vanished, but its system has not. Every time you pump gas at Exxon or Chevron, you are still paying a tax to Rockefeller's legacy. He won, even when he lost. So, ask yourself, when you flip the switch tonight, do you truly own that light, or are you just renting it from an empire that never truly faded?